From historically low ratings that shocked the baseball world, to people overreacting to the whole situation, it's time to see whether the 2023 World Series was the worst one ever. Even though the World Series is the biggest stage in Major League Baseball, 2023 Fall Classic ratings were terrible. And it's not as if this was unexpected, because the ratings have been declining for years. After some underwhelming series, the 2016 World Series finally brought some eyes back to the sport when an average of 22.8 million viewers tuned in per game. And hey, it's not surprising considering how great that Cubs vs. Indians series was. But unfortunately for the MLB, those numbers couldn't be maintained for the years to come. The ratings kept declining as time went on, eventually getting to just 9.7 million viewers in 2020. Though at the same time, this was to be expected since it was during the pandemic and everything just felt more boring. But what about the 11.7 million viewers in 2021 and 2022? And most importantly, what about the measly million viewers per game for the 2023 Fall Classic? Those numbers were so low that it set a record for the lowest average number of viewers in World Series history. Considering that the Fall Classic is supposed to be equivalent to the NBA Finals and the Super Bowl, that's just straight up embarrassing. Game 2 of the 2023 World Series had the lowest rating of all time with 4.0, while Game 3 had the least amount of average viewers at just 8.1 million. So how has everyone been reacting to these terrible numbers? Well, the reactions have been all over the place. Of course, you have the typical baseball haters who claim that the dip in viewership numbers is because it's a boring sport, while some called it a dying sport. On top of that, they said that the numbers have been on the decline for years, so this shouldn't be surprising. Others tried to explain why the ratings were so low, with one Twitter user pointing to the increased use of illegal streams in modern times. Another highlighted that the series should cut some slack since there was so much other stuff going on at the same time as the Fall Classic. Though, of course, there are a few die-hard fans who said they couldn't care less about the low ratings. But the thing is, they should care. At the end of the day, the low ratings of the 2023 World Series tell us one thing: baseball is dealing with a ton of issues, and one of them is their lack of star power. If you want to be a successful sports league, then you need to be able to boast off your league having some massive names. After all, the more an athlete can draw, the more popular that sport will become. And when it comes to having stars who can do that, baseball has fallen behind big time. Back in the day, we had legends like Babe Ruth, Willie Mays, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, and Barry Bonds leading the charge, and they transcended the sport the way Michael Jordan did, and LeBron James currently does. After all, just take a look at the World Series viewership numbers when the MLB had more star power. They were always between the 20 to 40 million mark, which is amazing. Nowadays in baseball, there just aren't any massive stars who get the world talking about the sport. Sure, you have Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout, but the list kinda ends there. Not to mention, they're yet to transcend the sport like past legends. But MLB owners refuse to understand that they need megastars, or else there's no incentive to tune into the World Series. Their philosophy is that fans should cheer for the team, the jersey and what it represents rather than specific players, but what they don't get is that people will only support teams that have dynamic, OP players that have mainstream appeal. After all, the NBA, NFL, and soccer have so many international fans for this very reason. For most of these fans, the team doesn't matter as much as the player, so the second the MLB has athletes like Curry, LeBron, Mahomes, and Messi, baseball will automatically have far more viewers. This is especially important for baseball because it feels like it's been ages since we've had a true megastar. On top of that, the MLB needs to take notes from the NBA and NFL, because those guys sure know how to promote their athletes. At the end of the day, no matter how good you are, you also need a ton of promotion to become a superstar in the sports world. As you guys might know, the MLB barely has much social media coverage, even though platforms like Instagram and TikTok are the best ways to get the world talking about athletes. The NBA and NFL have fully capitalized on all of these platforms, and since 2014, they've seen a huge jump in popularity and revenue. What's more, most baseball fans are on the older side, and social media is the only way to get younger fans to feel interested in the sport. Not only do they ensure that their games get good coverage, but individual teams see to it that their star players are in the spotlight. Just look at how well Victor Wembanyama has been promoted since 2022. As for the MLB, does anyone really remember the MVP or CY Young winners? Not really, but a lot of people can name NBA or NFL MVPs with ease. NBA and NFL players are marketed so well that people are dying to see what they'll do, especially when it's the final stage of the season. But that's not the case in the MLB. I mean, I don't even recall seeing any posts congratulating the Rangers or the MVP of the series, Corey Seager. But during the NBA Finals and the Super Bowl, it's a different story. And besides all that, the MLB season is way too long. A 162-game regular season is not ideal, even in the slightest, and it drags all the way into the last days of October or early November. Here's the thing though, by the time the MLB regular season actually comes to an end, sports fans are already excited about the NBA and NFL season since they start around the time of the World Series. And since it's been so long without both sports, everyone just tunes into basketball and football rather than baseball. So the MLB should have realized a while ago that they need to start the season earlier. That way the postseason and World Series can take place in July or August when there are barely any sports for fans to watch. Just think about it. If sports fans didn't have the NBA or NFL to watch, wouldn't some of them tune into the World Series since it's such a major event? But of course, it's impossible to discount the fact that the best teams weren't involved. The final stage of any sports league has to have the best and most popular teams involved, but in 2023, that wasn't the case as the Atlanta Braves, Houston Astros, and Philadelphia Phillies didn't make it. If we got a matchup like the Braves or Phillies versus the Astros, that would have been big, so the viewership numbers might have been much higher. What's more, there would have been far more coverage as well. Instead, the Rangers and Diamondbacks made it to the Fall Classic, and since they were both wild, they weren't all that to begin with. Sure, they both somehow made it to the final stage, but they lacked star power, so people didn't feel as inclined to tune in. Either way, it seems like people are also overreacting to the situation at hand. As I told you guys earlier, a Twitter user pointed out that illegal streams are far more common nowadays as compared to the past, and a massive number of viewers go unaccounted for. Because of this, it could be that there were millions who watched the 2023 World Series live through these sites. Not to mention, the videos covering the highlights of each game also got decent amounts of views, with games 1 and 5 having over 1 million views. Plus, the stadium was packed throughout the series as there were over 40,000 people in attendance every game. In fact, the number almost reached 50,000 for the last 3 games. That's pretty darn impressive, and even though both teams weren't the most mainstream, they put on a show for the fans in some of the games, especially Game 1. I mean, baseball fans were claiming that it was one of the greatest Game 1s in World Series history, while others said that it was the type of game that'll still be talked about 3 decades from now. That's a ton of praise. And they wouldn't say all that for no reason. Plus, after a heartbreaking defeat in Game 1, Arizona responded really well with a Game 2 win, which spiced things up. Seeing 2 wild card teams go at it like this was amazing, and their efforts should be celebrated rather than put down by everyone. At the end of the day, the TV viewership numbers aren't the be-all and end-all, so from people overreacting to the whole situation, to the historically low ratings that shocked the baseball world, that was everything on whether the 2023 World Series was the worst one ever.